varies with these different profiles. And because, it's really hard to, well, there's one way to do it in which you look at some climatology and you assume that's what's happening all the time. And, or else you just pick a mean velocity of sound. So in this, we took a mean. But if you were to look at the climatology, it doesn't change the results very much.
But nobody's looked at like the model like SOCI. Look at the density structure in SOCI and see how it varies and if that affects your...
It definitely affects the sound speeds because we know that what we get back are just times of arrival. So the time when the float heard from these sound sources. And the process of going from there to making a line takes really long. And it takes a lot of fidgeting around with the data and varying the sound speed a little bit. And for some floats, some sound speeds work better. For some other one work better. And it's like this art that you have to do to make sure that you get a track out of it. So yes, it varies, but we haven't taken into account that variability. Yes.
You got the 800 for diffusivity?
Yes.
MIT sphere?
Uh-huh.
What value are you using to run this model?
I don't know that. I didn't run the MIT model. It was done by John Marshall's group at MIT, and I don't know what subgrid parameterizations they had in it. Yes?
Could you go back to your first slide that showed the 2D structure of the ocean?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you're looking at the LCDW, is that?
Lower circumpolar deep waters.
Right, that's what you're looking at?
No, I'm looking at upper circumpolar deep waters.
Okay, all right.
Because I think, upper circumpolar deep waters are entirely above the...
Right.
Yeah.
What would happen if you put the floats and drifters in another water body?
So I don't know what's going to happen in all of them, but if I was to guess, if you put them at the surface, they would get ejected out of the ACC because that's where the mean...
What about the LCW? The LC, I can't read it, LC.
LCDW. Both are DWs and LC. So I think even the LCDW is fluxing things to the south, but it's more... I think the LCDW does have topography come in, and so you can have mean flows that go southwards.
I guess I'm a little confused. It must be a real simple answer here, but that water body that you're studying is well off the seafloor, right?
Well off, yeah.
1,000 meters,
Mm-hmm.
yet the topography is affecting its flow.
Oh, you mean in individual floats?
Yeah.
Or just fluxing south, which...
Well, how am I confused here? The flow is, at least according to that scale, there may be 2,000 meters above the seafloor.
Yeah.
So how is the seafloor topography affecting the flow?
The way that the seafloor topography affects the flow at those depths is that as sort of the 0th order approximation in the ocean, you say that it's just a thin sheet. And if there was no stratification, then the seafloor topography will affect things all the way from the bottom to the top. You have something called Taylor columns that get generated in homogeneous fluids over topography. And that's a consequence that you cannot have any Z dependence in the flow. And so if you have topography, that the flow cannot go over it. It has to go around it.
Well, shouldn't that completely break down the concept of an idea of separate water bodies?
No, it doesn't, because that idea is for an idealized homogeneous fluid. Now you add stratification. So there is some, so you have a topography over there. There's only some extent to which its effects would propagate up. And I think that the topography is big enough to actually propagate its effects all the way up to the surface in some cases.
Would the topography completely break that down? And get into the Scotian Sea?
Break what down?
That stratification
Oh.
you've shown there.
So
that model completely falls apart if you get into shallow, highly topographic variation.
Right. So the thing is that this is a conceptual model that it's an average. So this 2D picture is what's happening on an average around the ACC. It's not, there are obviously locations in the ACC where the UCDW is not fluxing things to the south. It's actually going to the north. But you want to, because this model was made to, at least the way I understand it, to get a big picture idea of that you have this strong flow, strong winds at the surface, And let's forget about, small scale topography for once and just see what things do on an average. Yeah, if you look at the three-dimensional structure, yeah, the ocean is 3D and 4D and everything breaks apart. Yes.
So what is our understanding of the LCDW water going toward the south?
So I'm not very familiar with it, but I think the LCDW, maybe Dawn knows better, but the idea is that both of these water masses are going south. The LCDW can go south in a mean sense because there's topography over there. So you can have zonal pressure gradients that will allow you to.
So this is the third dimension in this conceptual model really has to be important because where that happens, it can't all happen locally.
Yeah.
Okay. That's,
Yeah.
because the fascinating thing, I normally don't think about the Antarctic, but the wind is driving fluid away from the South Pole.
Right.
And the topography that you're showing going onto the Scotian
Right.
Sea is driving fluid away from the South Pole. And we know the Antarctic bottom water takes fluid away from the South Pole.
Right.
So basically everything in that location is taking fluid away.
Right.
To put it back in, you got to do it some other place.
Yeah.
And I guess that was the question I was asking before, which you answered. But it's a much more complicated system than I ever thought before.
Yeah.
Kind of nice.
Definitely. Yes.
The seamount,
Uh-huh.
you showed east of the kind of eddy-like structure.
You mean this? Okay, wait.
Yeah.
This one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, is that sort of structure been seen downstream from other seamounts? Is this
Yeah.
something special? Or?
No. It's not. It's not something really special, but it's sort of a wake behind a seamount. Or in engineering, you have, you try to flow things in a certain direction, and you have a little pillar in the middle. Things try to go around it, and you form a recirculation behind it.
So there wasn't anything surprising here about this?
No, it's not entirely surprising. The thing is that the idealized models in which you do see these wakes at the back, the flow that's coming in is steady, or it's not full of turbulent energy coming in. And how would the thing behave in a turbulent sort of flow? Because what's coming in is not just zonal flow, it's eddies that are coming in. And so why would you, would you actually see a wake at the topography, behind topography or not?
Okay.
Just to follow up with Ken's question, I think Christina Holland, one of our students, and Gary Mitchum, showed these eddies propagating off the Hawaiian Islands
Okay.
on the surface waters, not
Mhm.
but it was pretty common, and they just kept shedding off one after another.
Right.
What was the chemical tracer? You said they used one, but then...
Oh,
found it.
it's a sulfur pentafluoride, so SF5
Fluoride?
penta.
Penta.
Yeah. Combined with something else, with like a big group. And one of the reasons that they use it is that it's really easy to detect. It's not really easy to detect, but even the smallest amount of concentrations can be detected. I forget what the number is as to like how small you can.
What did it show?
So generally speaking, it showed the same thing as what the float showed. Things are moving east, and it's being spread in the meridional direction as things are going. But the bigger results that came from the tracer was that unlike a float, the tracer can actually spread in the vertical direction. The float is constrained to be at a single layer. And so if you look at when it was released, they tried really hard to release it in a single isopycnal layer. And I think the spread was less than 50 meters when it was launched. And if you think about it, you're trying to release a tracer at 1,200 meters depth in really rough seas. The ocean is going up and down by 9 or 10 meters on some days. And so maybe they chose even a day that was not that rough, but still, when you're at that depth, even the smallest motion gets amplified at that depth. And so Jim Ledwell has this system of which controls itself and releases tracer in a density level. And Then you go back and track it, and you see that, oh, it was a 50-meter layer, and it has spread in the vertical. And looking at how much it has spread in the vertical, you get an idea of what the diapicnal mixing is doing, and that's the mixing across density layers. And is it higher in some regions, or is it lower? And because you go back after 2 years, it gives you an integrated picture. And so what we saw was that you did transects over there before the rough topography came in, and you saw that it has spread only a little bit, or a certain amount. And as you started to go through the Scotia Sea, where you have rough topography, and it allows for internal waves and lee waves to form and break and mix things in the vertical. And you do see an enhancement of diapicnal diffusivities by, I think, a factor of almost 3 or 4 as you enter the Scotia Sea.
Okay, you keep talking about topography.
So let's do
Isn't
this.
that what's called geology?
Right. That's our last question, but on the formal session. So let me thank all of you for coming. It's kind of time to. We're informal, so I invite anybody to come up and ask some additional questions. But I do want to make a comment, because most of you are graduate students, and my challenge to all of you is to give as nice a seminar after 3 years?
3 years.
3 years as Dhruv did. So thanks
Thank
again.
you.